Kryzan, you support extending health care coverage to every American as well as making investments in green technologies and education. Given the current economic crisis, can the federal government afford to carry out these plans, and are you willing to set aside any of your proposals until the economy recovers?
I think that we do have funds available to us in this economy. We've talked a little bit about taxes here. I want to make things perfectly clear for people out there because I know Chris Lee does not want you to understand this. I favor middle-class tax cuts for hardworking families. What I don't favor is tax cuts for the fat cats on Wall Street that we just paid $700 billion to bail out last week. For the guys who go to China and make personal fortunes off of creating jobs there and then don't want to pay their taxes here. For people like the executives at AIG who took taxpayer money and went on a spending spree at a spa to the tune of $300,000 or $400,000 on our hard-earned tax dollars. I think people who make over $250,000 a year, the people I've just described, need to pay their fair share. Then we'll have some dollars in this economy to invest for the rest of us.
Alice's ideas are going to cost taxpayers. My policy, an energy policy, which is a real energy policy, which puts people back to work, is getting our major oil companies to start looking at exploration in the United States that will put tens of thousands of people back to work with good paying jobs, which doesn't cost the government money. We all want to push for alternative energy, and it is our long-term future. But in the interim, we are in a fiscal crisis in this country. We need to ensure that we're doing all we can to keep dollars and keep dollars in this country and keep people working in this country. There's a big difference. And to set the record straight, because Mrs. Kryzan had started off with an attack ad on commercials about our family business that started here in the 60s and today employs over 300 families. We have a very successful record and a proud record in this community, and I don't want that slandered.
Is there anything in your plan, anything you would like to get done that you'd be willing to put on the back burner because of the crisis?
I think that the two issues that you mentioned, Jill, alternative energy and health care, are not issues that we can put on the back burner. I do believe that if we end the war in Iraq, something that my opponent is not interested in doing, stop spending $12 billion a month there, and have a fair tax system where everybody pays their fair share, we are going to have enough dollars in this economy to keep moving forward, to create new jobs, and to provide for the needs of the middle-class families of this country who've been forgotten for too long.
Mr. Lee, 30 seconds on anything that might have to wait.
In 2007, last year, I believe we spent well over $2 trillion on health care. I don't think we need to be spending more dollars on health care. We just need to be doing it more efficiently and getting the private sector involved so that we can find innovative ways to save money. But I don't believe, unlike Mrs. Kryzan, that we need more government dollars going into health care.
My name is Kathleen Ballard, and I am the Executive Director of the Niagara Frontier Industry Education Council. Good evening to both of you. School districts in Western New York are dealing with critical issues in education. The lack of funding for No Child Left Behind, addressing the growing population of dropouts who are unemployable, accessibility to post-secondary education, and the enormous debt incurred from post-secondary education. What, in your opinion, is the federal government's role in supporting education?
Mr. Lee, we start with you, and you have 45 seconds.
Well, the No Child Left Behind program that the federal government started, I believe, about 7 years ago, they came up with some interesting concepts, but they haven't been funding it to the level that they need to. So I'm frustrated with the fact that if the federal government wants to add new ideas, new concepts, they need to also back that up with funding, because it's a frustration for people involved in education at the local level where they're saying you have to meet certain standards, and oh, by the way, you're not getting any more dollars to help you do that. I think that's a problem. What we do need is more involvement from the community and at the local level to determine what we need to do to improve our education here in our inner cities and throughout the urban areas.
Ms. Kryzan, 45 seconds here.
Well, I think that there are a lot of teachers that are very frustrated with No Child Left Behind. It doesn't allow teachers to teach to the students, and it penalizes schools where there are so-called underperforming students who are underperforming for reasons that they should not be held accountable for in terms of meeting the standards on a standardized test. So I think that No Child Left Behind needs to be either pitched or radically reformed. I want teachers to be able to teach students the skills they need for the jobs of the 21st century, and those skills aren't going to be measured on a standardized test. And I'm running out of time, but I'd love to talk about higher education. I took a course at UB a couple of years ago as an undergraduate. I was the oldest person in the room by 40 years, but those students work hard to put themselves through school, and I think the federal government needs to help in terms of grants and tax credits to middle-class families for tuition assistance.
So you once served as an attorney for Occidental Chemical Corporation in litigation filed against the company by those affected by pollution at Love Canal. Now, since then, you've represented many clients in your practice of environmental law, but should voters be concerned that you once defended the company that caused one of the most serious environmental disasters in U.S. history?
No, I don't think voters should be concerned about that, Bob. I have, in that litigation, I worked to settle those claims so that a fund was created for the residents at Love Canal who were the victims of a terrible, terrible tragedy that they didn't cause and had no control over solving. I was able to do that quickly, working with the lawyers for the plaintiffs in that action, the lawyers for the residents, and I'm happy to say today the lawyers for the residents at Love Canal support my candidacy, as does the judge's law clerk who oversaw those cases. I've also been endorsed by the New York League of Conservation Voters and the Sierra Club, and of most pride to me, quite frankly, and I'm quite humbled by their vote of confidence. There is a group of local environmental activists who have formed a group called Environmentalists for Alice, who are supporting my campaign. I think I've learned a lot over my years as an environmental lawyer, and I'm ready to go to Washington to work on alternative energy issues, which I think are the most important issues to bring our economy forward into the 21st century here in Western New York.
Thank you, Ms. Kryzan. Mr. Lee, on this question a minute.
Well, I sat down with Jerry Zaremski, one of your associates, Bob, recently, and he had asked me if I would get into the mudslinging and specifically the case of Occidental. And I've kept my word. We haven't done commercials trying to go after Mrs. Kryzan for that event that she participated in many years ago. But ironically, she's come after and distorted the truth on a business that we've had very successfully here in Orchard Park. Today, again, there are over 300 people with good paying jobs. She alludes to the fact that we exported jobs to China. And let me set the record straight. We are competing in a global economy. In Orchard Park, we've actually hired more people to actually design products that we could localize into the Chinese market and go after a market where there's 1.2 billion people. We want to be after that market and grow in that market, because what you don't want is a competitor in China to come back and threaten the jobs we have here in Western New York. It's the right strategy for U.S. manufacturers. We've done this in other parts of the world, in Europe and in Asia, and I'm very proud of that fact. It's allowed us to continue to grow good paying jobs here in Western New York, something that has been